Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Kegley with Matt Stevens. We're going to talk for a few minutes about the situation with Illinois looking to replace Aaron Henry as defensive coordinator. And we'll give you a little bit of a preview. This is going to be laid out similar to an article that Matt put on IlliniGuys.com today. If you like the way this goes and you want a lot more information, Matt did almost 5,000 words on this. So there's a lot more information to be had. We're just kind of scratching the surface. And the first thing we will say is that on this situation, things are being played very close to the vest. We do not want to imply that we have super insider information on all of this. It's constructing, having little pieces of information, constructing an overall picture from multiple sources, and letting people kind of percolate on what that means. Matt, let's talk a little bit about, first off, as somebody who's been covering the Illini for years, did you see Aaron Henry going out and finding another position, or were you shocked? What were your thoughts as this story unfolded in real time?
I was surprised. Cards on the table. I was texting with Aaron Henry pretty frequently right up until the announcement, and just had no reason to ask him if he was going to Notre Dame. Cards on the table, I was texting him about the players that he had just seen in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, while Aaron Henry was wearing Illinois gear in Mobile to support Gabe Yakus, Luke Altmaier, J.C. Davis, and Melvin Priestley in Mobile, and had no reason to ask him about Notre Dame. And then came to find out that a lot of people had no reason to ask him about Notre Dame because it happened so quickly. We're talking about in the midst of like a week, Mike. So, it came as a surprise to me, but when the details kind of started to trickle out about how it happened, when it happened, who's involved here, it makes a lot more sense for Aaron. A lot of people are calling, we'll get into, maybe we'll get into this, maybe we won't, but a lot of people are calling this a soft firing, a soft landing for Aaron Henry. I can tell you without any hesitation that if Notre Dame's defensive backs coach does not leave for Jesse Minter's new staff with the Baltimore Ravens, Aaron Henry is still the defensive coordinator at Illinois. There was no backroom meeting with him and Brett Bielema that, hey, buddy, you need to go find another job. That was not the case. And as we're starting, and I know we're going to get into this pretty soon in this pod, Mike, but the timing of this, if Brett Bielema wanted a new defensive coordinator, he would have gotten rid of Aaron Henry weeks, if not months ago, in order to put himself in a better scenario to hire people who have already taken jobs this winter. And it's made it very difficult to, figure out who's gone where. Because, Mike, just, again, cards on the table, being truthful with our subscribers and the people who love us here at Illini Guys, we did a Aaron Henry hot board, like you said, a 5,000-word Aaron Henry hot board that I submitted to you and to all our other bosses, Larry Smith and Brad Sturdy, right after, I think, Christmas. And a lot of those names now are just irrelevant because they've taken other jobs. And they've taken other jobs since Christmas. And so if Brett Bielema wanted to go on a defensive coordinator search, he would have done that probably around Christmas and taken the time to do that because the pool would have been a lot deeper. And the pool isn't very deep in terms of candidates right now because Brett Bielema is not in a position where he can ask somebody who's just taken a job maybe like 2 weeks ago or even a month ago to reverse course and now become Illinois' defensive coordinator. That's just not realistic. So the timing stinks for Brett Bielema, but the timing kind of stunk for Notre Dame to lose its DB coach. And then Aaron Henry got a recommendation from his former defensive coordinator, Chris Ash. Marcus Freeman really loved that recommendation because they actually went to Jay Valia, who's the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma under Brent Venables. Got turned down there, and then he took Chris Ash's recommendation and just tried to figure out if Aaron Henry was available. And Notre Dame has made it very, very accommodating for Aaron Henry to go to South Bend and become the new DB coach with the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is probably Illinois is a little bit lucky that Brett Bielema is so involved in coaching organizations and a guy who's pretty well connected just because of his personality, which probably will give him a little bit more leeway in a tough situation like this than some other coaches.
Yeah,
But
2 weeks ago, Mike, they had the American Football Coaches Association's meetings in Charlotte, which I usually go to, but this year I didn't. Bielema would have loved to have been able to go on a coordinator search then too. And
exactly.
I'm just telling you that everybody was caught off guard because of the timing of this, because Notre Dame lost its DB coach a week ago on January 25th. So to the NFL. So this was bad timing for everybody involved, and it's not optimal timing for Illinois to go D coordinator searching at this point.
Yeah, well, I think too, you get into these situations and you just got to play catch up now, and there's nothing you can do about it. Let's talk a little bit because Brett Bielema talks about how he's always got a file and he's prepared for these things. And he's also a guy who plays very close to the vest, and he's not going to give you a list of the names in those files. So let's do a little bit of detectiving and talk about some coaches that Brett has connections with. Doesn't mean that he's going to even look at these guys, but these are people that you could at least logically construct a case that he might look at them. And let's start off with some of those. And folks, there'll be a lot more detail than what we talk about here on IlliniGuys.com. It's really easy to go and subscribe. It's basically go to IlliniGuys.com, hit the registration. It's $99 annually. It's a great deal that you can follow Illinois sports. You also get our message boards where you can actually ask Matt questions about this, which has a very lively thread right now talking about that. And you can talk to Brad, Ked, Larry, myself, Marcus, whoever's on. We've got that Steve Sturm. So let's talk a little bit about a few coaches and just paint, very high 30,000 foot level. Let's talk about first off, Mark Stoops.
Yeah. Just first off the bat, like Mike, I think, what are we on the 5-year anniversary of Illini Guys? I think this is my 4th year with Illini Guys. First hot board I've ever done. Believe it or not, there's been so much cohesion in the head coaching world at Illinois in the big sports. And I didn't have to do one for Barry Lunny because it just got when Tony Peterson got fired, there was one candidate, and it turned out to be Barry Lunny. So there was no point in putting our subscribers through a hot board. First hot board I've ever done. So not saying that this is not great timing for the people in the Smith Center. There's never not an optimal timing to do coaching searches when you run a site like Illini Guys, trust me, and do coaching hot boards. So let's start with Mark Stoops. The recently unemployed Mark and very, very wealthy Mark Stoops, because he did mitigate his buyout with Kentucky, not in terms of amount, but in terms of how it was paid out. He will now be paid till, I think, 2031, his full buyout with Kentucky, which will be in the neighborhood of $30 million, I think. So he doesn't have to work for a really long time, but he's a Stoops. And that means that, like, unless you get to a certain age like Bob, and Mark is the baby of the 3 brothers, you're probably going to work, or at least want to. And then Mark had the unfortunate, I guess, luck in the coaching carousel, that even in a coaching carousel this past off season where everybody wanted head coaching experience, Mark Stoops didn't have a chair to sit in at the end of the whole day and didn't have a head coaching job to opt to after Kentucky let him go. So, it would make a lot of sense for him to maybe get back into the coordinator world, which he hasn't been in since 2012 when he was coordinating Florida State's defense for Jimbo Fisher. But he's a Stoops, which means he's in the Hayden Fry tree, which means Brett Bielema has ties to all 3 of the Stoops brothers. He and Mark know each other really, really well. They've never worked together, but they've, when Brett was a player, Mark was a GA for Hayden Fry at Iowa. Brett does have the Hawkeye tattoo on his left calf for a reason. And so from that standpoint, I put it out on Twitter that Mark Stoops is one of those candidates, at least to me, that makes so much sense that you just believe in this industry that it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? So that's usually the rule of thumb. But if you wanted to check every box in terms of experience, in terms of being able to coordinate a defense, being able to not have to rejigger your staff, because Mark Stoops' experience is actually in the secondary along with defensive play calling. That's what he did at Florida State. For under Jimbo was BDB's coach and defensive coordinator. So Brett wouldn't have to rejigger anything he did there with Archie McDaniel or Terrence Jamison or anything like that. And I mean, I guess financially it would help Illinois because there's no need to mediate his deal. His deal is not mediated based off of another job that he can get. Kentucky owes the whole thing. So he can actually double dip in salary. You would think that would give Illinois a financial advantage to not, hold Illinois hostage for, a top 10 coordinator salary, maybe if Mark Stoops wanted to come on board. It just makes, in my head, Mike, it just makes too much sense. But he does check every box that Brett Bielema might be looking for if he wants to keep this pace of 19 wins over 2 years going for Illinois. And I think it would be a home run hire if Illinois could make it.
So that would be fun. And of course, anytime you got a former, head coach with his resume, that means the odds are long. But let's.
Yeah, I think the one minus might be he is a Stoops, and there is a reputation that he can be sometimes what's the nice way to say, cantankerous, sometimes because. And he hasn't worked for anybody in a dozen
Jimbo.
years.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to be a fly on the wall. If Mark Stoops is the defensive coordinator in the Smith Center, there might be some knockout drag out meetings of two massively ego people, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you have some real personalities in that building immediately when Mark Stoops walks in the building. But you have a resume also that says your defense might be exactly what you want it to be, quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah. Now, next up, maybe to just a quick one is Charlie Bullen, who obviously was here. Talk a little bit about Charlie.
Well, they've had lunch because I know when Brett Bielema went to go, I try to scout Ivy League players. This past fall, late fall, he took about 5 assistants and personnel people to New Jersey, and met with Charlie, had lunch. And I think a week later, Brian Daboll gets fired and Charlie's now the interim defensive coordinator with the Giants. So that's interesting too, because Charlie actually might be a better candidate had Brian Daboll not been fired. And why do I mean that? What do I mean by that is that Charlie actually had good results, even if it wasn't wins. The Giants won their last 2 games, but it wasn't like they went 5-0 when Charlie Bullen was calling the defense at that point. But he did get a lot of good film and a lot of good reviews as a first-time defensive play caller in the NFL. That led to some interviews with NFL teams, whether it's defensive coordinator or outside linebacker coach elsewhere. And then when John Harbaugh got the job with the Giants, he gave Charlie Bullen an open invitation that I want you back on my staff. So Charlie Bullen has a job right now with the Giants under John Harbaugh. He would have to leave that job and leave that, I guess, new operation, and almost like what is being talked about as like a 5-year commitment from the Maras with John Harbaugh to rebuild the Giants in order to be Illinois' defensive coordinator. What I would tell you is that Brett has a real big affinity for Charlie Bullen, and I think that that's reciprocated from Charlie as well. The downside is that when Charlie showed up in 2023 to be the outside linebackers coach in Gabe Yakis' sophomore year at Illinois, that was the first time Charlie's been a college coach in 15 years, in a 15-year gap. And my read on the situation is that when you've had that much experience in the NFL, and Charlie was with the Patriots and he was with the Arizona Cardinals before he came back to Illinois, and then you go back to the NFL, you don't typically come back to college. I think Charlie's very, very happy coaching adult men in the National Football League. But maybe he would like to be a defensive coordinator at a Big Ten program, that is on the rise, and do it for a guy that he has an affinity for in Brett Bielema. That's why Charlie is on the hot board, on the Illini guys hot board. But I think it would take a good doing of convincing of Charlie to leave John Harbaugh's new operation with the New York Giants when Harbaugh thinks so highly of Charlie Bullen, he wants him on his staff. And so that's kind of the plus and minuses of Charlie, but I think he's on there because he's just an obvious. Bielema thinks a lot of him. That's a position that he coached in the NFL. He thought a lot of what Charlie was able to do with Gabe Yakus in that second year, even though 2023 didn't go all that well. But there's an aggressiveness to the way that Charlie wants to play defense, and I think that Brett Bielema wants to get back to that. And I think, again, it would be a home run hire for Illinois. I just don't know the reality of the situation because I think Charlie's pretty comfortable in the three-letter league.
Yeah. And that would, again, these are all, we're not trying to make stone cold locks or anything like that. We're just trying to give you an idea of some folks that make sense that Brett Bielema has a connection to.
Sure. So and let me add, like, if we do get intel, the hot board will be updated.
Yeah, exactly.
And it will go, these are not in order, but we can put them in order if we get intel that suggests this candidate is a real deal, favorite to get the job.
Yeah. Now here's one that's bound to get some
here we go.
Emotions going. Ryan Walters, who's currently highly compensated Washington defensive coordinator.
Well, we can't have a defensive coordinator hot board at Illinois and with the Illini guys without having Ryan Walters on it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's get this out of the way. Okay, let's set aside the ego and like the water that still might be under that bridge, wherever that bridge is. Okay.
Yep.
Since Walters left Illinois and at the end of 2022 to go to Purdue. Okay. Let's put that over here. Okay. We talked about timing before, Mike. And so quickly, about 2.5 weeks ago, Ryan Walters signed a new long-term extension to be the defensive coordinator at Washington under Jed Fish. My understanding is Jed Fish tried everything he could to get in the mix at his alma mater at Florida when they had an opening. And Jed would have taken Ryan with him back to the SEC. Remember, Ryan was the defensive coordinator at Missouri.
Yep.
When they were in the SEC under Barry Odom. Jed would have taken Ryan with him and made him the Florida defensive coordinator. When that didn't happen, he locked Ryan up in Seattle to a deal that pays Ryan $2 million a year to be the head coach at Washington. That's bad enough, but that's a guaranteed deal that Illinois would have to buy out in order to even get to the point where we're hiring Ryan Walters. So it's a 2-year deal at $2 million apiece. I can do math. I took one math class at Eastern Illinois University. That's $4 million right there. You're going to have to pay Ryan somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 or 2.5. So now you've committed $6 to $6.5 million in order for Ryan Walters to call your defense in the 2026 season. That's not a meeting that I think Brett Bielema wants to have with Josh Whitman. And this is why the timing of what has happened with Aaron Henry really puts Brett Bielema, in my opinion, at a disadvantage. Because if last month he wanted to hire Ryan Walters, this would have been a lot easier conversation, and it probably would have gotten a lot further. Because I do think that there's a lot of water under that bridge that can be, there's a lot of feelings that can be put aside if the two men understand that we were pretty good together in 2021 and especially in 2022. And Ryan does still credit Brett Bielema for, advancing his career in a way that he was able to get the Purdue job. And Brett Bielema is sympathetic about anybody getting fired after what happened to him at Arkansas. So there's a lot of personal feelings that I think have the ability to be put aside. I just look at the financials of it, and I don't think Brett Bielema was going to spend $6 million on anybody to coordinate his defense. So I think he thinks highly of Ryan, the ability to coordinate and call a defense, but I don't know if he thinks it's $6 million worth. And if that's the case, I think Ryan's going to be in Seattle.
Yeah, that moves us on to one final person that kind of has some tighter connections. Rob Smith,
Yeah, Rob is currently the defensive coordinator for one of Bielema's buddies, Greg Schiano, over at Rutgers. And my thought there is that Rutgers' defense was actually worse than Illinois' last year. So that could be a situation in which Rob is trying to get his guys and get his players so that they can run. He and Greg can both run their system at Rutgers because they did finish 5-7. But that's a difficult sell if you're Bielema because, in my opinion, and I think in Brett Bielema's opinion too, because I think first of all you're into the beginning of the rebuild of the defense at Rutgers. I do think Greg Schiano values Rob after what he did, at Minnesota after leaving Bielema in Arkansas. Like he had multiple defensive coordinator jobs afterwards in that regard. He's still a very young coach. And I think that Rob kind of wants to try to make this work at Rutgers because he is an East Coast guy and he is a New Jersey guy. So I don't think that that's logical, but it is somebody that Bielema has worked with and has had success with at Arkansas. He did go to 3 bowl games at Arkansas with Rob coordinating that defense. So every time they play Rutgers, there's an affinity for the two guys in that building, putting together that defense, and Greg and Rob. But I don't know how realistic that is either, in the sense that if people were really and look, we're not going to the polls. I'm not going to a firehouse and electing the defensive coordinator at Illinois, and neither is any other fan. But that's a tough sell for his next media availability if he announces Rob Smith as the defensive coordinator based off of, there hasn't been an elite amount of Rob hasn't been a Broyles Award candidate, a finalist in quite some time. And that's a tough sell for a fan base that wants to have this hire be a home run.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, there's a lot of different connections out there. That one wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, but then that means he'll probably be the guy you should put your money on. Let's go with just a few coaches. We don't want to belabor this too much, but go to a few coaches. Now, we've heard Justin Wilcox's name has been inserted out there by some individuals, not necessarily that it's insider, but it does make sense.
Sure.
So let's just hit him and a couple others real quick on Justin Wilcox, the former California head coach.
I thought he had a good run at Cal. It's not a secret why it didn't work at Cal. He and Ron Rivera did not get along, and Ron Rivera has now essentially – the two Bay Area schools have gone to this general manager mode like professional football, where they're in charge. And Andrew Luck is the general manager in Stanford. Ron Rivera, a Cal alum, is the general manager at Cal. And Ron Rivera always wanted his dude in there, and Justin Wilcox wasn't his dude. Now, also, Justin Wilcox lost Fernando Mendoza in the portal, lost Jaden Ott, his running back, in the portal, and Cal suffered greatly because of it. But Justin Wilcox, I thought, had a really good run. He's a West Coast, Pacific Northwest guy, played at Oregon, has had experience at Boise State, has had experience at Oregon, has had obviously experience at Cal. Had 1 year as a defense coordinator at Wisconsin under Brett's friend Paul Christ. The interesting thing there is that Justin and Paul Christ, it's my understanding, both interviewed for the Oregon State job that went to Jamarcus Shepard this past offseason in the carousel. So Justin Wilcox wants to get back in. Yeah. But I don't think he's, again, like Mark Stoops, I don't think he has a chair in the FBS coaching carousel to sit in. And I don't think he wants to sit out the 2026 season. So he's a guy that checks a lot of boxes. My concern with Justin is that he has not recruited or has a lot of connections to the Midwest. The counter to that is that Bielema has almost gone to this system in which his coordinators don't do a lot of the legwork in recruiting anyway. So if he thinks highly of Justin and his ability to put together a defense, again, another guy that, because of his experience at Cal, hasn't coordinated a defense in quite some time.
Right.
So, but if he thinks highly of Justin Wilcox's defensive philosophy, he checks a lot of boxes. The only other thing he would have to do, and this is an easy fix, but I just want to point it out, Wilcox's experience more or less is what he played, which is linebacker at Oregon. You'd have to figure out what you want to do with Justin and or Archie McDaniel and rejiggering your staff, because Aaron Henry coached the safeties along with, Corey Parker coaching the DBs. You have to figure out a way to do that. But if you're convinced that Justin Wilcox, the guy that you want calling your defense, you can make that work. I'm just pointing out what would have to be rejiggered in terms of the staff in order for that to happen. But he's a name that you got to keep your eye on, because if Brett, and I'm saying if, this is not an I know or an even I feel, this is an I think, if he and Brett Bielema can get simpatico philosophy-wise, Justin Wilcox is a really good football coach. And again, I think it's somebody that Illinois fans would be very, very happy to hear is coordinating their defense in 2026.
Yeah. And like I said, Bielema, this is where that relationships and the way he, is involved in the American Football Coaches Association gives him options that other coaches just won't have. But let's run over real quick. Jeff Collins, the former Temple and Georgia Tech head coach.
Truth be told, I've covered Jeff Collins. He was the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State when I was the beat writer there under Dan Mullen. And Jeff Collins' energy and his personality and his defensive philosophy got him the job at Temple and got him the job at Georgia Tech. He's a Nick Saban tree guy. He was a recruiting coordinator, essentially, and director of player personnel under Nick in 2007. And that's what got him his ability to inject energy and to recruit. I'm telling you, even in the short amount of time that you might have Jeff Collins, your ability to recruit the areas that he knows very, very well, which is the southeastern part of the country, your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Tennessees, your Mississippis, he would do very well there for Illinois. And that's a market that Illinois doesn't, tap into all that much. But he would do very well there. But Jeff Collins, recruiting wise, works well at a lot of places. It worked well at Temple too, and out on the East Coast. So if they feel like they need an energy guy as a recruiter and a guy who's just, all gas, no brakes in terms of philosophy and how he wants to, coordinate a defense and call a defense, Jeff Collins would be your guy. The downside with Jeff Collins is that if it's not going well, that loudness gets a little bit, kind of easy to kind of tone out.
Yeah.
And there's a tendency like what happened at Georgia Tech, where they just needed to hear a different voice. And you do need to have a calming influence in the building if you're going to hire Jeff Collins, because he's not going to be it. And I say that with all affinity for Jeff, because his style is his style. But he's currently, basically doing the Jim Leonard thing that Jim Leonard did at Illinois for Shane Beamer at South Carolina, because when he got fired at Georgia Tech, he instantly became Mac Brown's defensive coordinator at North Carolina. Well, when Mac Brown got, pushed out at North Carolina, Bill Belichick did not retain him. And so he's kind of been doing the behind the scenes deal at South Carolina during the 2025 season. And I think Jeff wants to get back in coordinating a defense as soon as possible. I just don't know if there's the fit there.
Okay. And so the next one's kind of interesting, because you are seeing head coaches from lower levels jump in at coordinator and other, other jobs. Chris Wilkerson, who had, a few years back had a good year at Eastern.
Yeah. I kind of feel bad putting his name out there, because I don't think Chris is one of those guys. And look, all cards on the table, that is my alma mater, Eastern Illinois, that he's currently the head coach of. I don't think he wants to quit. You know what I'm saying? I think he wants to. But Eastern has had back-to-back 3-win seasons, and it's not going in the right direction if you base it off of the last 2 years. I think Chris Wilkerson's a really, really good defensive coach. The good thing also is that there's somebody else in that Smith Center that thinks Chris Wilkerson's a really good coach, and his name is Barry Lundy Jr. And they have a history together at South San Jose State. I think it's over a decade ago, because that's the last time Chris coordinated a defense, by the way, when they worked together there. Barry Lundy and his wife are the godparents of Chris Wilkerson's son, who was a player at Eastern, is now a student assistant after an injury cut his playing career. They are his godparents. And so they know Chris really, really well. If it went down that road, I think there could be a very, very good chemistry. I'm not sure that Chris wants to give up on this project. Financially, he could increase his salary by 4.5 times, but being the defensive coordinator at Illinois compared to being the head coach at Eastern. That salary hasn't changed since I went to school there. And Bob Spoo was making $135,000 a year.
Right.
And so I think Chris could be a great hire. He hasn't coordinated a defense in a long time because he's been a head coach at Eastern, and then before that at the University of Chicago, a D3 school. But he's had success, and I think that philosophy-wise, Brett thinks highly of him. Brett Bielema thinks highly of him. And Barry Lunny, of course, thinks highly of him. And it's another guy where I don't think you have to rejigger the staff all that much. And you are seeing this. You've seen guys, go from FCS head coach. You've seen guys go from power or group of 6 head coach to power conference coordinator. So this is not an unusual move if Chris wants to make it. I put his name out there if Chris wants to make this move, but sometimes guys want to be a head coach and they want to make this work. And if Chris wants to make this work at Eastern, more power to him.
Yep. So let's go on to one that I think is a long shot. Wink Martindale at Michigan, who's tied in fairly or unfairly, however you feel about it, with Connor Stallions. I see with I don't see is good, and he is a good defensive coordinator. I don't see there's a snowball's chance in heck. So again, put your money on him in Vegas, but I don't see there's any chance he gets this.
2 quick things with Wink. One is it's unfairly with Connor Stallions because he didn't become Michigan's defensive coordinator until 2024. So everything that Brett Bielema feels about Jim Harbaugh and Michigan and what they did, and we've detailed it here on Illini Guys years ago about the tickets that Connor Stallions bought via the Illinois Athletic Department website, and there's evidence that his people were inside Memorial Stadium for some of those 2022 games that were played. Brett Bielema has made it very public how he feels about that.
Brett's not shy.
He's made it very public that he thinks Michigan cheated. Okay.
Yeah.
Wink wasn't involved with that because he was with the Baltimore Ravens. He got hired by Sharon Moore in 2024 because Jesse Minter went with Jim Harbaugh to the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay. So Wink's not involved with any of that. The problem is that Wink is 66 years old. There's 2 problems with Wink, I think, who I think is one of the better defensive coordinators in all the country. And he doesn't have a job right now because Kyle Whittingham did not retain him when he got the job at Michigan late in the game, by the way. I think Wink Martindale, the reporting is that he's gone on about 8 different NFL interviews. And I think he's going to end up on somebody's NFL staff. I really do. I mean, but if he's not, he's somebody that could come in, coordinate your defense. If you're worried about a 66-year-old not having the energy to recruit, again, Brett Bielema has systematically put together a plan in the Smith Center that coordinators really don't recruit all that much. Barry Lunny will tell you that. So if you're looking for just X's and O's guys that can come in and coach guys up and coach guys to a higher level, Wink's probably your guy. The other problem is at Michigan, Wink was one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the country at over $2 million a year. I want to point out that Ryan Walters was the first in program history to be a 7-figure coordinator at Illinois. And you're asking Josh Whitman to double that number probably to hire Wink. And so I think that there's some financial and I think some NFL things that are going to happen for Wink Martindale to not get this job. But I think he's, again, a guy that if Brett Bielema showed up at the dais and said, hey, I've hired Wink Martindale to
the resume speaks for itself.
That's a home run.
So now in-house promotion, you got Terrence Jamison, D-line coach. You got Archie McDaniel, linebackers coach, cornerback coach, Corey Parker. I don't know that I'm not certain that any of them is considered generally ready for it, but Bielema's been the guy who's always been willing to put his chips on who he perceives has talent and then see what they can do.
You can't keep calling Terrence Jamison one of the best defensive line coaches in the country and not think that he's going to get up for some coordinator jobs here pretty soon. I think Archie McDaniel is going to be a coordinator at an FBS program sooner rather than later. Whether that's at Illinois or not, I don't know. I think Corey Parker, we could be talking about Corey Parker in 5 years being an FBS head coach. I think he's got that kind of personality. Similar to what I just described with Jeff Collins is what I see out of Corey Parker in spades. So here's what I'm telling you, Mike Cagley, as one of my bosses at Illini guys. If Illinois makes another in-house promotion like they did with Aaron Henry, I'm going to need about a week of vacation and a week of vacation away from our football message board because it might go nuclear. I don't think that the people in Illinois – I don't think Brett Bielema is interested in an in-house promotion right now because I think he feels like he has to hire. That would be – with all three of those gentlemen that I just named, they would be first-time defensive play callers, just like Aaron Henry was. Okay, if you thought that was a major problem, and I'm not saying to you that Brett Bielema thought that was a major problem. I think a lot of people around Brett Bielema who don't have any say in the process thought that was a major problem. If Brett Bielema doesn't think that's a major problem, I think any of those three guys could be involved. I think Archie McDaniel could certainly be involved. There's no reason for me to think that JMO wouldn't be involved. But I think Brett Bielema is going to go outside of the building to get somebody with experience. I do feel that way. Now, I've just said that, and he's probably going to hire a first-time defensive coordinator, and I'm going to need that vacation time. Because that's a decision that's not going to go over well with the fan base, but they don't have any say in this process. But that's the thing that I think that's going to eliminate those three gentlemen, and they're going to have a new boss because I don't think Brett Bielema wants to go after 19 wins over 2 years. I don't think Brett Bielema wants to go into 2026 with a first-time defensive coordinator.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. And then a couple other names that came out, like I said, just because we had somebody talk about John Heacock, who was the defensive coordinator at Iowa State, Mr. 335. That was St. Dominic's Rosary. He didn't follow Matt Campbell to Penn State, so I'm not certain if he'd want to make the trek to Champaign, but maybe that's another guy that would be thought of.
Maybe. He runs an odd man front. He retired.
Yeah, that's why I said he retired rather than go to
you're basically – so I put Chris Kleiman, just to put cards on the table, I put Chris Kleiman on our hot board for this defensive coordinator spot. I think he's got less of a chance than Wink Martindale to get it because I think he's going to stay retired unless he's going to be a head coach. My understanding is that John Heathcote could have gone with Matt Campbell to Penn State and just said – kind of like Bud Foster did at Virginia Tech. I've got a legacy that I'm pretty happy with. I think he's in his 60s. I'm good with that. So I think John's going to stay retired. Otherwise, I think he would have taken a shot at, maybe winning a national championship under Matt Campbell at Penn State.
And then the other name is Pete Kowalski, how do you pronounce his name? Former Texas DC. Any shot there? I mean,
there's a shot. He's been out of the game for over a year, but I didn't think Here's the problem: is that after not making the college football playoff, Sark went out and I think because I've covered him before. Went out and got a home run hire to coordinate his defense in Will Muschamp to come back to Texas and run the Longhorns defense. Everybody kind of knows what I think of Coach Boom. I think he's one of the best in the game, but he's been out of it for a couple of years because his son was, graduating from college. And if there was anybody I thought he was going to end up going back to working for, it was his best friend and former college roommate, Kirby Smart over at Georgia. Sark did a hell of a job to actually get, I think, Boom over to Texas again, because he used to coordinate the defense under Mac Brown. That's a long way to say when Sark made that move, right, everybody covering Texas went, wait a minute, Pete's your defensive coordinator. What are we doing here? And I don't think anything in 2025 led me to believe that Texas had a defensive problem. Like, their problem a lot of the time was they didn't score enough points. And when Sark's your head coach, that's a real big problem. And Arch Manning is your quarterback. That's a real big problem. So I would have thought that he'd been snatched up by now, but it's a possibility. I didn't put him in our hot board right now because there's no intel that says that, that connection has been made.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something that could come through the rumor mill. And then we end up putting him higher up the ladder on our hot board very, very quickly because he does have a good reputation.
Yeah. What about DJ Elliott over at NC State, which there's some intertwining there.
Yeah, because Dave Doran has beaten the posse one more time in Raleigh and kept his job at North Carolina State. And good for Dave. He keeps winning off the hot seat.
Yeah.
And good for him because he's a really, really good dude. And people up here remember him because he had a hell of a run at Northern Illinois before he got the NC State job. And he's on the Bielema tree because he used to be the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin under Brett Bielema. So Bielema would be taking one of his buddy's guys if he did that. But DJ Elliott's a reputable defensive coordinator, an experienced defensive coordinator. The problem there, off the top of my head, is that, and I don't necessarily think that this doesn't cross his name off of any list, but that's Dave Doran's defense in Raleigh, and whether DJ is the caretaker of Dave Doran's defense or not really doesn't matter to me, but maybe it matters to others, and maybe it matters to Brett Bielema. You could have said that about Ryan Walters when he was working under Barry Odom. You could say that, honestly, you could have said that about Kirby Smart when he was working for Nick Saban. So I don't put a lot of stock into that, but yeah, he's somebody. I also want to credit one of our people at Illini Guys, Brad Sturdy, put out DJ Durkin.
Yep.
Who has been retained by new Auburn head coach Alex Golish to be the defensive coordinator after DJ Durkin was the interim head coach when Hugh Freeze got fired. Here's the problem there, and I know this, again, because that's a beat that I used to cover, which is Auburn. DJ put a lot of money in the emotional bank with Auburn boosters. Hi, Jimmy. To essentially nudge and prod and push Alex to keep DJ Durkin. There is no connection there other than the boosters really, really like DJ Durkin. And if the Auburn boosters, hi, Jimmy, hi, Raymond, really like you, they'll find a way to keep you because some of them are on the board of trustees, which always makes Auburn a very, very interesting situation. So Alex is going to keep DJ Durkin for a while. I don't think DJ is going to make that kind of a play and then a few months later bolt for Illinois. So he's a darn good defensive coordinator. There are off the field things that happened at Maryland that I think would still need to be ironed out, especially with a new president at the University of Illinois. But they've been ironed out at other places in the Southeastern Conference. But I don't think DJ is going anywhere. Durkin, I mean, yeah. Elliott could be a possibility. It's just I don't think Bielema's necessarily looking to steal one of his buddy's defensive coordinators. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do because, again, I get back to this timing and this pool of candidates isn't exactly putting Brett Bielema in a position of strength.
Yeah. So we've went through a ton of them. We're going to be covering, this over the next few weeks or however long it takes. I do think this is something that, again, we've reiterated this a couple times. Bielema's got contacts throughout college football, maybe more than your average coach because of his participation in the American Football Coaching Association. So one is interested in seeing who he will uncover. And there's some talent out there. So I think there's reason for Illini fans to be hopeful. I was not of the opinion that every problem assailing the Illinois football program was related to Aaron Henry. But at the same time, I do think this is an opportunity for the team to improve. So two things can be true at once. So I do think it'll be something for Illini fans to keep an eye on. The schedule looks favorable next year. If you can sign a couple, three more linemen on the defensive side of the ball who can play, and Illinois did a nice job on offense, this team could win anywhere from 9 to 10 games next year if the quarterback plays well and health is on the side of the Illini. So there's a lot at stake. Matt, you got 2 minutes here. Give your wrap, and we'll let people go.
More or less, I kind of agree with what you just said, Mike. Anytime you talk to anybody in the Smith Center right now, they're sure to remind you of 19 wins over the last 2 years.
They should.
And whether the timing stinks for them, and it does, it shouldn't preclude you from going out and getting a quality defensive play caller, because these guys want to be a part of something that's on the rise. And I do think there is a reputation in Champaign-Urbana and in the Smith Center that Illinois football under Brett Bielema is on the rise. So if you're looking, if you're at a place that you feel like is stagnant, or you're at a place where you want to make that next career jump, and there are guys, I talk to a lot of people in this industry that are certainly fit that billing, right? Brett Bielema is going to be able to talk to some quality people. Can he make a hire like he did with Ryan Walters? We're going to see. In his first staff, we're going to see. Can he make a hire like he did the second time around at offensive coordinator, like he did with Barry Lunny Jr.? We're going to see. I do think that this is a critical hire for Brett Bielema to keep the momentum going after 24 and 25 and 19 wins in 2 years. I'll say that. And I think that Brett Bielema recognizes the moment and recognizes the situation and knows that from a momentum standpoint, this hire is going to make or break the ability for Illinois to stay on the rise in the Big Ten Conference. And I do think that this is a great – I think that this could be a personally and professionally good move for Aaron Henry. But I think for Illinois to maybe take a reset with what they're doing at defensive coordinator and essentially what they're doing in that building philosophy-wise on defense, it could be a good thing for the Fighting Illini as well. So, like you said, both things can be true. And I do think that if Brett Bielema can meet the moment and hire a defensive coordinator that can maybe do a little bit of a philosophical and X's and O's reset of what they're doing on defense, then everybody wins. And that momentum that you've gotten from 24 and 25 could get into 26 and continue to get rolling, because Illinois has money. The Big Ten programs have money to spend on coaches. And I just don't think that's going to be a problem for Illinois anymore. And I don't think it's going to be a problem for Brett Bielema. And the one thing we've always said, Mike, is that quickly, the one thing Brett Bielema has been proven time and time again is I can hire good coaches. And he's done it time and time again. He's going to have to prove it one more time with a really, really big hire to replace Aaron Henry. But if history is any kind of indicator of what you're going to get here, Brett Bielema may make a pretty good hire here in the near future for the 2026 defense.
Yep, and this will be exciting one, folks. So stay tuned at IlliniGuys.com. Of course, you can go there, as we talked earlier, and we'd love to have more subscribers and be part of that community. Also, you can follow us on this particular YouTube channel, and you can also download our podcasts or the video version pretty much anywhere. So until next time, folks, which will probably be just in a couple nights when Northwestern comes to visit Illinois, we will see you. And until then, go Illini.